Good afternoon, and welcome to the fourth installment of SHFM's Conversation That Matters series, presented by SHFM's Diversity and Inclusion Council. Today, our conversation will focus on neurodiversity. My name is Jessica Tenten. I am a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Council, and my day job is District Manager with LifeWorks Restaurant Group. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, I have a few quick reminders that you may have heard from previous SHFM virtual events. First, we'd love to know you are here with us, so please drop in a friendly hello in the chat. Hello. Please ask your questions throughout the session in the Q&A window in your toolbar. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, so be sure to ask those questions throughout the session. The session is being recorded so it can be played on demand. The recording will be available on SHFM's website and YouTube channel later this week. And lastly, there will be a 60-second evaluation for this session that will appear in your browser when the event ends or when you exit the session. Be sure to share your thoughts with us as we continue to plan SHFM events. Today's SHFM educational programming was developed by your peers, and I want to say a huge thank you to the Diversity and Inclusion Council for their tremendous work on this session. To provide some background on the council was developed to foster an environment that embraces diversity and inclusion at all levels in the markets and communities we serve, with a goal to increase the diversity of membership, champion employment opportunities, highlight and encourage procurement opportunities for minority-owned business within the food service industry. The overarching objective is to bring awareness to diversity issues surrounding the workplace hospitality segment. The council looks to assist, support, and encourage our members to better understand the importance of diversity to our business and what it means to our society and industry as a whole. We have some phenomenal speakers and a fascinating topic to get to. I'd like to introduce today's session moderator, who hardly needs an introduction. Damian Monticello, SHFM's President and Senior Manager of Hospitality Services with GuideWell, where he is responsible for serving the food service needs of more than 15,000 employees throughout the GuideWell family of companies through their Cafe Fresh and Perks concepts. Additionally, he is responsible for the conference center at Florida Blue, corporate travel, employee fitness centers, and the GuideWell Athletic Complex, an on-site athletic facility designed to engage employees and improve their overall health through participation in intramural sports leagues. Damian, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm excited to have this conversation about neurodiversity, an important but sometimes overlooked topic of diversity and inclusion. Today's conversation brings together a variety of perspectives on neurodiversity and will provide important information on hiring practices, managing neurodiverse employees, parenting neurodiverse children, and the power of the neurodiverse community. So let's talk about it. Please join me in welcoming our panel today. We have Dr. Stephen Beer, founder, Popcorn for the People. Dr. Beer has been involved with philanthropy for over 4 decades and is the author of over a dozen medical articles and case reports. He has also created training programs for medical students and residents. In 2015, Dr. Beer purchased a local popcorn store, and in 2016, transferred ownership to the nonprofit Let's Work for Good, creating the social enterprise Popcorn for the People, which is dedicated to the creation of meaningful, sustainable employment for autistic workers and workers with other developmental disabilities. A fun fact about Steve is that his twin boys were accidentally born in his house, and his wife had to do CPR to save them. 30 years later, happy to say they are fine. One built the driverless car, and the other is an engineer for Apple. Our second panelist today is Dr. Ben Margolis. He is a board certified in neurology and psychiatry, having completed the combined residency program at Brown University. He specializes in neuropsychiatric care for adults with IDD in the New York Hudson Valley. He attended medical school at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine after the post-baccalaureate pre-medical program at Columbia University, and holds a BFA from the School of Visual Arts in New York City. He serves as a board member of the American Academy of Developmental Medicine and Dentistry as treasurer, and is on the Special Olympics New York Advisory Committee for their Strong Minds program. Fun fact about Dr. Ben, during the pandemic, he has taken up guitar, and at the request of his family, has refrained from playing within earshot of other people. This fun fact may or may not be true. Our third panelist today is Matt Slapka, and he is an autistic adult in his early middle 30s who works for 3 different agencies as a direct support professional for developmental clients and their families. His experience is not only based on the job, but also on a personal level, based on the past, present, and future. Matt has a master's degree from Manhattanville College. Fun fact about Matt is that he loves video games, anime, and is a general media nut, but his favorite method of relaxation is to sit in a pool, take deep controlled breaths, and read. And our final panelist today is Julie Vashani. Julie is a food service director with LifeWorks Restaurant Group. She brings years of food and beverage experience and knowledge to the leadership team. With more than 20 years in the industry, Julie's background spans from small independently owned restaurants to large food management companies producing over 10 million in annual sales. She has a teenage son who was diagnosed at age 8 with ADHD. She has been an integral part in his life as an advocate, helping him and his teachers frame his challenges as differences rather than deficits. Julie has cultured strategies and skills that provide the structured neurodiverse teens as well as adults need to succeed. She uses her knowledge and practices in the workplace to hire, train, and retain neurodiverse employees. Fun fact about Julie, she enjoys traveling abroad. She has visited England, France, and Italy, and is looking forward to her mother-daughter trip in Spain coming in the spring of 2022. With that, I would like to start our questions for our panelists, and we're going to start with Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben, there are a lot of acronyms and definitions around the topic of neurodiversity, many of them that even sound alike. For example, IDD, DSP, ADD. Can you provide us some basic and proper terminology and definitions around neurodiversity?
Sure. I'll try to do so sensitively. Thank you for the warm introduction. So I'm just to reintroduce myself, I'm Ben Margolis. So I'm a neuropsychiatrist and I work with adults with IDD. And one of the things that I learned in coming into the world of care of individuals or neurodiverse individuals was that it is a culture to be sensitive to. And one of the challenges can be understanding a lot of the acronym soup, and also the way care is deployed and the way the way individuals are supported. So to define the world of as we call it neurodiversity, I guess is a wonderful term. IDD stands for intellectual and developmental disability. So that represents, I'm sorry, I only have 2010 to 2014 census data, but that represents about between 3 and 4% of the population as of 2010. As of 2014, according to ACS with Cornell, about between 3 and 4 million Americans with about a 5 million person margin of error. So this is not a small segment of our population. And people with IDD, or intellectual and developmental disability, or NDD is also used for neurodevelopmental disability, is a very large group of individuals. And it's a very heterogeneous and diverse group that includes people with intellectual disabilities, people with autism, people with ADHD, people with learning disabilities. And I'm not going to get necessarily into the details of talking about what the diagnostic criteria are, but I can just kind of describe more of a gestalt concept, and maybe Dr. Beer might be actually better to be able to connect the clinical descriptors that I see and use to the workplace, given that he really has bridged both of these worlds. But what I can maybe offer is that individuals with autism and with ADHD do not necessarily have intellectual disability, and individuals with intellectual disability or IDD may not have autism. But what they do share in common is sometimes impairments in functioning socially and in the workplace and in the world as a whole. And a big part of that is what I see as a lack of respect and a lack of understanding and a lack of opportunity. I spend a great deal of my time differentiating between what kinds of problems are problems that need medication supports when individuals are having a really rough time, and a huge number of individuals who are neurodiverse, who have difficulties with attention, who may have learning disabilities that have interfered with their functioning, who may have autism and difficulty understanding and communicating with others. A huge number of problems that they experience are the same kinds of problems that everyone else would experience if they were excluded from the workplace, if they were excluded socially from the communities that they are a part of. And I think I just want to offer and thank the panel and the people attending the panel, as you and we have the opportunity to be able to address this, to be able to reduce the need for medication burden, and to be able to provide opportunities for an enormous number of Americans, whether or not they have intellectual disability, whether or not they have autism, other neurodevelopmental changes, to be a part of the world and live full lives as we all have a right to as human beings. So with that, I'll just introduce. So the way people are incorporated into the fold, I'll let other people discuss. But agencies are organizations that are licensed by states to be able to provide services to individuals with neurodevelopmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, with neurodiverse problems, and those supports are vast. Can include pre-vocational and community habilitation supports, can include residential supports, can include staffing supports, and engaging with these organizations. I work for one of them called Access Supports for Living in New York, that was started as an organization to be able to connect individuals and as an employment service for individuals with IDD. And so I would just encourage, ask questions. The community as a whole is eager to teach. That's how I learned. If you build it, they will come, as I'm sure Dr. Beer will attest. And if you engage places like the ARC or agencies within your communities, I think you will find people eager to engage, eager to connect, and eager to provide any education that can be needed to be able to connect individuals with NDD with the jobs they are ready to do. So I'll stop if there's anything more.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Ben. Just one more quick question before we move on to Dr. Steve. You mentioned autism, and as the parent myself of a now young adult on the autism spectrum, The number of individuals known to have autism has increased dramatically from the 1990s, when the rate was around 1 in 1,000, to now with the most current rate listed as 1 in 54. Aside from better and earlier diagnosis, are there any key indicators that you're seeing that account for this increase?
Yeah, so there's a lot of thought about why that is. So it's probably multifactorial, where in addition, the fact is that DSM-5 changed the definition and lumped a lot of things into autism. So our data may be skewed. So we may have separated things like pervasive developmental disorder in the past, Asperger's syndrome, which was an autism spectrum disorder, but was not necessarily considered autism proper. And so now all of these syndromes are lumped into the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. There is less of a stigma around autism, and certainly awareness has increased since 1990. So screening is done more aggressively, screening is done publicly, and screening is and screening also leads to services which can tremendously benefit individuals the earlier they get it. So that there is a societal push to increase the number of of individuals we identify. I don't have, there are also thoughts about, a lot of people have ideas about food additives, about environmental toxins, about stressors in the, civilizationally. I won't get into the vaccine issue, but there are many debunked claims about various medical etiologies. But it probably is multifactorial. The fact is, I think, if anything, what it may represent, regardless of whether or not it's increasing, for us, what it means is this is a large number of people, a large segment of the population that is going to be a tsunami of individuals growing up and entering the workforce and entering the world in which we live that'll need maybe some unique considerations, and it's our job, no matter what field we're in, to be able to educate ourselves and prepare for the kids who are growing up now who are identified as autistic and may need certain considerations to be able to live full lives. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Exactly, and then perfect answer, and a perfect segue then with people entering the workforce to Dr. Steve. I've been fascinated by your story and a couple of chances we've had to talk. So I'm going to start off with a pretty straightforward question. Can you tell us about how Popcorn for the People got started?
Sure. Hi, I'm Steve Beer from Popcorn for the People. And I think those listening in the food industry, which makes up this entire group, will appreciate how we sort of stumbled into this. I have a son, he's high functioning autistic. At that point, he was around 22 years old. This is going back to 2014. And he could not get any employment that would be satisfying to a person. It was employment that was really beneath him. And it really all broke when he was working at a supermarket. He was pushing shopping carts, and on a hot July day, he forgot to put his suntan lotion on, came home red as a lobster. And his mom at that point said, "Enough, Stephen, go figure something out for him." So we began looking into the idea of employment for a young man on the autism spectrum. And we saw that was out there was very sparse, and it really hasn't changed much. There were a lot of very nice mom and pops, but they were really not set up for long-term employment. There were families with a child who was on the autism spectrum, good for the local, good for the family, but nothing that we could really count on 10, 20 years from now. Others were government supported, and of course that can change on any given day with the government. A new administration comes in, so you can't count on the government really long-term for employment. So the only thing left was to create something ourselves, and went to the local business directory looking at businesses that were for sale in the neighborhood. And you know, life's funny sometimes. There, right on the top, the very first thing was a popcorn store. And we began to think about it. Well, popcorn, you know, it's It's eaten in all seasons. It's eaten all across the country by every socioeconomic group likes popcorn. It's not a fad. It's not dangerous to make. So we bought a little popcorn store, just for Sam and a couple of his friends. And things grew from there. We began to have more and more families join us, and we turned it into a nonprofit. And now we fast forward to 2021, we now have a 4,000 square foot processing center for cooking and packaging the popcorn, which is now too small. We're at Rutgers football, Rutgers basketball, we're at the Javits Center. We're down to Philadelphia Eagles. And what started out with Sam before COVID hit was up to about really 52 workers on the autism spectrum and with some other developmental disabilities. And so here we are now with a nonprofit, but it's a business. It's a, I wouldn't say thriving business, but at least fighting through COVID, successful and employing a lot of young men and women who otherwise would have been out of work.
That's a fabulous story. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? How can various organizations that are listening to our conversation today, aside from just hiring people on the autism spectrum or those with neurodiversity, how can they be advocates?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so well, as you said, number one, go hire someone. But putting that aside, listen, everyone listening to this conference, do not underestimate the power that you have, the connections that can be made. Now, I'll give a few simple examples that came from the society just in the few weeks since we joined. And by the way, did I mention, Damien, we are members now? We've joined?
Yes, thank you. We're so proud to have you as part of the family now.
And so even in a couple of weeks, there were people within your organization. One person heard that we were having trouble. We were trying to get into a sports arena. And at her company, she reached out to us and told us, hey, I know an executive who has a connection over at that sports arena, and made the connection. Now, that simple phone call could end up with dozens of workers being employed. So everyone there knows someone in the food industry, and it doesn't have to be just for popcorn for the people. It could be for local groups in your area where you can make connections, where you could think about where could products be sold and help out. Another thing that's been a big help is someone from the organization reached out and said, hey, in the holiday season, we like to send out tins for gifts. Could we use your organization? That also is going to put a lot of people to work. So for those of you listening, you have, as we used to say in the old day, Rolodexes. You can use it to make connections, to put people together. And I'm not just talking about popcorn for the people, although we would love if you did it for popcorn for the people. And you can help put people to work.
One more question for you right now, Dr. Steve. Can you explain what can the B&I, our business and industry segment of the food service industry, take away from popcorn for the people's mission?
Okay. I think we can take away is there's this untapped workforce. Everyone in this industry, I know in every state that's listening, is always having difficulty finding good workers, retaining good workers. The workers on the autism spectrum, at this point in time, most of them have spent their life unemployed or only partially employed. So you have a group of workers, and I could say, if not 100%, pretty close to 100%, they don't smoke, they don't drink. This is really important, and they're going to be there on time and can give a lot of energy to a job. So don't overlook this population. Don't get, as my kids would say, freaked out by little differences. It's really true. Don't judge a book by a cover. This is a great workforce.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Steve. Really appreciate your insights. I would like to move on to Julie. I have a couple questions for you. First off, could you share some of your experiences with having a son diagnosed with ADHD?
Sure. My son Owen was diagnosed in 3rd grade, and he in the fall is going to be a high school freshman. When someone thinks of someone with ADHD, you kind of think about, oh, they're hyper, they can't sit still, and they can't focus. Well, those two symptoms are kind of like the tip of an iceberg. So underneath the water is this huge area and other things that contribute to ADHD, a big part being executive functioning. So people with ADHD have weak executive functioning. Executive functions are the mental skills you use to learn, work, and manage your daily life. Executive functioning is responsible for things like paying attention, organizing and planning, task initiation, regulating emotions, and flexibility. So when Owen was in school, I was trying to get him an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, so he can receive accommodations in the classroom. Owen's teachers thought he was lazy, he was disengaged, he was labeled as a bad kid. And, you know, being his mom, I knew that wasn't the case with Owen. So I requested that he be tested for any learning disabilities. So tests came back and Owen fell within normal range of all tests. So they didn't want to do an IEP. So me being his biggest advocate, I persisted. I fought to get Owen on an IEP for his ADHD because his learning barriers didn't show with a test. They were his anxiety, his weak executive functioning skills. So eventually I was successful, and now he receives accommodations in the classroom, like extra time on tests, project modifications, which one of his teacher implemented for the entire classroom, because instead of, you know, writing a 5-page paper, he did a whole presentation and did a, you know, designed a book cover and wrote a rap about the subject. So she thought that was really cool. So she opened it up to the rest of the class, and they just had a great time with it. So he also receives technology assistance for his reading and writing.
I'm very familiar with the IEP process that you
Yes.
and I shared in one of our previous calls. I'm hoping I maybe have given out more scars than I have as going through and being an advocate for my own child. It can be a bit of a chore, as you and I both know.
Yes.
Another question I have for you is, your experience with your son has provided you with knowledge and practices that you apply in the workplace.
Mhm.
What are some examples of workplace accommodations that can be implemented for someone that is neurodiverse?
Okay. So providing instructions that are specific and preferably in a written format. So checklists work amazingly well with neurodiverse. When I say specific, I mean specific. So I also have a daughter that's older than Owen, and I can tell them both to clean their rooms, and my daughter does it, no problems. She can clean a room. If I tell Owen that, he cannot, he just sits there. His room will not get cleaned. But if I give him a checklist, number 1, pick up all your clothes off the floor. Number 2, put them in the laundry basket. Number 3, make your bed. Number 4, and so on and so forth, he'll get it done. So it's an investment in the beginning. Sounds like a lot of work, but if they have that checklist to refer back to and written instruction done right, and every time after that. Providing feedback, make sure it's detailed feedback, not like, oh, you need to clean your room a little better. You have to say, oh, well, next time when you clean your room, make sure that you vacuum all the crumbs on your rug and you dust your TV. And if someone that is neurodiverse is doing something incorrect, the wrong way, or even in a social situation, they most of the time don't know they are. So they depend on you to tell them in a, you know, constructive way that they are doing something wrong and what they could do better or what they can do instead. But you have to be careful with that one. You don't want to do it in front of everyone all the time. You want to do it when you know is appropriate in private. Also being direct when you give directions or just anything. Sarcasm is a no-no because they take everything literally. And it helps, I've noticed with my son, to have them repeat what I said, even if it's, you know, coaching, constructive criticism, or just direction, because what they perceive what I said versus what in reality I said could be totally, you know, he could be here and I could be here. So I like him to repeat what I said or what he thought he heard me say, so I can correct and explain further if that is not what I really said. And the last one is explain changes. So change is really hard for neurodiverse. So just explain to them as early as you know, as early as you can, the why, the how we're going to change it, and the when we're going to change it. So it makes transitions a little bit easier for them and they understand why you're doing it.
Great points, not only for managing neurodiverse folks, but just about anybody in the workplace. I think we can all do better with some more clear and consistent direction. Great segue into our final panelist for today, Matt. Matt, love to bring in. Hi, Matt. I'd love to bring you into the conversation here. And,
oh yeah, absolutely.
The first question I have for you is, I'd really love for you to share some of your experience and career path as a neurodiverse person yourself.
Certainly. To kind of give you a very basic idea, everybody. I went to for context, I went to college first. I went to Manhattanville College for a undergraduate and graduate degree for English writing and psychology as a minor. I got that with a fine arts master's with an English writing concentration. And afterwards, I had some trouble finding jobs because it was a significant trouble for both me socially, and there were certain things I didn't wish to do because socially I was aware of my capabilities. I didn't want to get into food selling or food general like what was it, like shop jobs, for example, where I have to sell a product. I didn't feel very good at it. So what I did was I got into several programs that required my that would give me assistance looking for jobs. I worked for a pharmacy near me. I worked for a what else did I work for? A wedding invitation person. I worked for what else? I did a lot of volunteer work during this time. Food bank, soup kitchen, stuff like that. And during this time when I was with the program, one of them told me and asked me and said, "Hey, you're one of the more socially capable autistic adults we have ever had. Would you like to work in this field?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll give it a shot." I've been doing this ever since. I've been doing this for about 4 to 5 years at this stage, and I'm still going forward. It's a great career.
That's great. I mean, listening to what some of the other panelists have said before, there's a lot of talk that's coming around communication. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this talk is about reframing communication for employers and neurodiverse employees.
Sure.
So how can factoring in communication or changes in communication help a neurodivergent individual succeed in the workplace?
I'm so glad you asked that. One of the ways I sell myself as a DSP, if I'm working in an individual setting, is specifically stating that the thing I can do is communicate with someone neurodiverse probably more effectively than someone who is neurotypical, although which we might not know that term. It refers to someone without the general associations that the neurodiverse do, like not autistic, not all that other stuff. So what I do when I sit down with someone is I, as Julie had said, talk with them, help them to recognize what I'm saying, help them to recognize what they're trying to tell me. So I'll repeat back to them as much as they repeat back to me. I will use their own interests and technological connections, such as they have a phone or if they have a computer they're more effective with. I'll use text messaging instead, or I'll use texts instead, or I'll talk about video games and connect their interests to the things we're talking about. Therefore, they'll understand it better. One thing I constantly do if I'm working in a home is if, for example, I'm dealing with a largely autistic group of individuals, I will not only turn on the TV and just turn up the volume, but I'll also turn on the closed captioning, because there is a difference between just listening to something and listening and reading it. It's a dual comprehension. It makes it easier to communicate with people if you're doing it on multiple levels.
Yeah, from my own personal experience, I can relate to that last point. My daughter Carson, from the beginning, has always watched everything with closed captions on.
Excellent.
And
yeah,
it's been a great tool for her to comprehend what someone is saying.
One thing I could definitely just state before we continue is absolutely, when you're sitting down with someone who is neurodiverse, if they're trying to tell you, if you're trying to get them to understand something, explain what they know first, then pick stuff out of that, positively reinforce what they already know, then say, I want this as well. Do you understand what that means? How can I explain it to you more effectively? What ways can we do learning devices or stuff like that kind of thing?
One more question for you, Matt, right now, and I'm sure we'll have some from our guests. As someone who advocates for neurodiverse individuals, what is your advice for employers as well as employees when interacting with neurodivergent people in the workplace? What are some of the do's and don'ts?
I'll kind of list down a couple if you'll give me a minute. Do absolutely listen. The first thing they're going to do is probably engage with you in a way that makes them feel emotionally invested. That may be something that you don't understand, but it's something they do. So it's something that you'll want to pay attention to immediately. Don't if you think you understand what they're talking about, don't assume you understand it the way they do. There's a significant, one of the oldest stories I've ever made was, I'm a very big video game fan, and several people I know who are neurotypical or also played a lot of video games. They understood mechanics, they understood aesthetics, they understood story. I understood the nitty-gritty of everything that I knew, which is how I engaged with it emotionally compared to them engaging with it kind of at a distance. So there was a disconnect there because I was capable of understanding something that they didn't pay much attention to. Back to do again. Do recognize that all neurodiverse people are all different neurodiverse people. You meet one person, you're going to think there's some general associated connections, and there might be psychologically or prescriptively speaking, but it's not always true. Like, I have 4 cousins, all on the autistic spectrum. Besides my, I have 4 cousins, and all of them are significantly different in their own way. One is somewhat nonverbal. The others are will talk your ear off, but they don't know how to engage as socially as you or I would hope, and I would hopefully get there eventually. Don't. Oh, of course. I cannot stress enough that one thing you should definitely not do is, you have to give me a minute. I apologize. I'll come back to that one.
Sure, no problem.
There are a couple more.
And as we move into some of the questions that we've been getting, I see some questions that have been coming in from our attendees. If you have a question, please be sure to add any of those into the Q&A box, which can be found on your toolbar. Dr. Ben, I'd like to come back to you for a moment. One question that I've seen come in is, we're starting to see in the US and other parts of the world, some different organizations like Popcorn for the People or Aspira Tech based out of Chicago that is hiring autistic folks in data entry and IT related fields. But we don't see a lot in the hospitality industry. in the United States. It's primarily in Europe. Are you seeing anything in other parts of the world that are more advanced in terms of neurodiversity being accepted into the workplace?
I love that question, and I wish I was a part of the larger world, and was part of the European community to be able to answer it more thoroughly. I can really only speak to the United States so far, and I'm in communication with colleagues in Canada, but not necessarily about integration into the workplace. I can tell you locally that, and also I wonder if part of that is has to do with. I'm sorry. I'm gonna back up for a moment. I can speak to locally where I've seen the most employment, and the reason I stopped is because I started thinking about the fact that the ADA and labor laws prevented us from being able to have the same kinds of workshops that we had 30 years ago, where there were things like adjusted wages that would accommodate for differences in productivity that may be related to all kinds of developmental or physical disabilities, and which totally understandably is not permitted. Everybody deserves a living wage as far as respect, but so I don't know how much labor laws in the United States and labor policies influence hiring practices. But I can say locally, the most frequent places people with intellectual disability are employed are oftentimes behind the scenes and not in direct customer relations roles. And that is unfortunate that there are people in the world who may consider interacting with someone with that is neurotypical as a foreign experience. And so hopefully the more work we do, the more we can offer opportunities for the public as a whole to integrate and feel more comfortable engaging in regular life with a more neurodiverse population. But certainly, even if that's a seed that we're planting in work like Dr. Beer is doing, it's certainly a great place to start. And I would just encourage the people that are working with, that are on the call today, if you're in a position to hire someone in a more behind the scenes role, if they're doing janitorial work, if they're doing work in a kitchen, if they're doing work bussing tables, use that to be able to introduce somebody in a more progressive, in a more forward, in a more forward-facing role over time. Let's start somewhere, and let's see where we can go as a civilization, respectfully and carefully going forward.
Okay, thank you. Julie, I have a question that came in that I think would be a good one to pose towards you. When managing a neurodiverse employee, are there any specific tools, software, or tactics that managers should be aware of that can help their employees succeed?
Nothing specifically for in the workplace that I'm aware of for, where I work in a, front of the house, kind of back of the house, food service. There is assisted technology that reads things aloud. If, you're a manager and you need the accommodations, there is, I think pretty much now all laptops or phones can do speech to text. So that's a lot easier as well for both children and adults. That's all I'm not sure of anything else personally. I'm sure there is a lot out there, but things that I use in the workplace are, the checklists, the accommodations, and things, based from my experience that I know work well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
not sure who really would be the best person to answer this. I think Dr. Ben is typing an answer to this question. What are some of the privacy concerns about neurodiverse employees? And I'll kind of open that up to anybody, Dr. Ben, Dr. Steve, if you got Matt.
If I may, I can actually comment on this one. I think
Sure.
it might be useful in this one. Primary concerns for neurodiverse employees: the ability to feel that they're being communicated with instead of at, the general emotional landscape where they feel they can either engage and feel that they're part of the community, or they don't, and therefore they feel that they're at a distance and feels like everyone else is not, part of the same team, which is certainly a definite concern that they don't want. They want to feel like they're engaged. They want to feel like they're part of the family. I would, given my own experience in this same field, I would also state, like, if they feel like there's a concept in the kind of work I do called that personal agency matters a great deal. That what I do as a worker, as a professional, as someone in the autistic community matters. That the job I do has a purpose to not only myself, but for my family and for the people around me. That I am making an impact. And I cannot state enough that this is a major concern. If I feel like I'm working in an office job, for example, if I'm doing the same thing 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, am I making an impact? Do I feel like what I'm doing matters? So I cannot overstate that that's something that everyone should be considering.
Let me jump in. I think the question was directed more towards as being an employer. Yes, so I would say this to potential employers. As far as privacy concerns, legally it falls under no different than any other privacy within the workplace. If there are any doubts or if it's feasible within your workplace, I would get either through email or written permission from the worker, or if appropriate, their guardian, for any potential privacy issues that come outside the normal workplace. So for example, perfect example, Madison Square Garden was just Popcorn for the People. They gave us this big award, and it was wonderful, and they came and they filmed to make a little commercial they're putting up on the TV. One of the workers did not want to be recorded. So we tried to set it up when he was not there. All the other workers had already signed permission to be allowed to be recorded. We do that as soon as a worker comes, as soon as someone's hired, whether they're on the spectrum or neurotypical, we have them sign a legal permission to be videoed, to be recorded, and so forth. Anything else above and beyond that may be a little special, then we try to communicate and get an email or written down with the worker, or if appropriate, with their family.
Thank you, Dr. Steve. Matt, I have another question that came in for you. Are there any assumptions or stigmas about the neurodiverse community you wish you could eliminate forever? And how can neurotypical people help?
Okay. Stigmas, specific stigmas. That we're generally aggressive, that we are, that because of either a willingness to step back on our emotions too much, that we recede too easily, or that we're unable to control them, we explode. Sometimes it is like that. There is this notion that I am stressed, I am annoyed, I am angry, I don't know how to hold it in, so I'm going to express it in some way that might be considered a problem. And that would be a problem in the workplace, no question. The problem is that why is that person stressed? What is happening in the workplace which is making them feel as if they cannot relieve it, or they cannot speak in a way that makes them feel that way? It may not even be anything that is happening inside their lives, which is being resonated at work. It may be something at the workplace, which is exasperating or creating it. So what's one way they can handle it? Talk. I I just keep bringing up communication. I constantly do that because if I see someone stressed in my own job, I'm saying, hey, relax. Everyone's a friend here. We're all doing our good job. I do this with neurotypical people as well. Don't even mind me. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? You feeling okay? Is everything you need? Can I get you a glass of water? Can you tell me what's going on? We can just take a break if you need to. Just a couple minutes. I'm sure no one will mind. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together. And that starts an intersection, starts a bridge, gets people communicating.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things that I've heard a lot is, oh, well, autism people are fill in the blank. And I think something you mentioned in one of our pre-sessions when we were getting ready for this is if you've met one person on the autism spectrum, you've met one person on the autism spectrum.
Correct.
There may be a few underlying things that can be similar, but everyone is still unique.
Yes.
And you have to take that uniqueness into account. For sure.
If you don't mind me, what was the supposition you heard?
Well, I mean, you said you hear it a lot. Either all autism people they immediately think of maybe the movie Rain Man. Everyone's fantastic at math.
Okay.
My daughter is terrible at math. I do believe that everyone on the spectrum has some sort of gift that they're given. And my daughter's happens to be in music and in the arts. So it's different for everybody.
If you don't mind, I'll do a little bit of 101 here. What you're referring to is what Rain Man was specifically showing was something we call Savantism. It is the notion of someone who has an appreciable interest and skill, which can be attributed to the real world. Also, that can also sometimes be referred to as magical autism, where, especially in media, someone who is coded autistic has an ability which is well known and well received by the people who watch the show. One of those is The Good Doctor. The Good Doctor does this, I think, a lot. And that's fine. I've watched shows, I enjoy them like this, but it's not reality. I have an interest in video games. Does that make me generally more socially capable or have an emotional connection with others? Not always. In certain circles, maybe. In other circles, perhaps not. You see what I'm saying?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely agree with you. I have one more question that came in, and I'm not really sure. Maybe I might be the one to answer this one. The question is there a dedicated link or area of resource that we can utilize to help find these services that pair individuals with IDD? And there are lots of things out there, lots of resources and places out there. I can say during our conversations putting this program together, even some of the conversations we've had with Dr. Steve, with Popcorn for the People joining SHFM, is trying to work within our own ranks for what can we do within our industry and how can we better inform. So we will be working on some things where we can have a repository or a place people can go to find links to resources that may be able to help them in their journey. So I would stay on the lookout for that. But as far as from a general larger world perspective, I will open that up to our panelists if they're familiar with anywhere that people might be able to go for some of this information currently. And that is why we need a place like what we're going to try to put together. It's so vast and so spread out. It's difficult to wrap your arms around it. Well, I do notice that we are getting close on time. I want to thank all of our panelists again for such an insightful session today. This is such an important topic to me and to so many others on this call. We can't thank you enough for being here and spending some time with us today and giving us your insight. I'm going to now send this back over to Jessica for some closing remarks.
Thank you. And I second that, Damien. I have learned so much during this session, and I hope that you all have learned a lot too. Thank you, Damien, for moderating this conversation. I want to also extend a big SHFM thank you to Steve, Ben, Matt, and Julie for taking the time to share such fascinating insight with the SHFM family. As I mentioned earlier, there will be a 60-second evaluation for this session that will appear in your browser through Zoom when the event ends or when you close out of Zoom. Be sure to share your thoughts with us as we continue to plan SHFM events. Before we sign off, I do want to remind everyone about the next Conversation That Matter installment on Wednesday, August 18th. So be sure to save the date. There will also be an installment in the fall, so be sure to watch your email for that announcement. We are also looking forward to exciting in-person events later this year. So please save the date for the first in-person 2021 local will be August 5th in Philadelphia. Watch your email for details for additional SHFM local events over the summer and fall. The Young Professional Summit in New York City on September 22nd. Registration will open in July, so stay tuned. And the National Conference, which will take place December 6th through 8th at the beautiful Omni Amelia Island Resort in Florida. So be sure to book your hotel online now. We'll put a link in the chat for more details on this and the conference. Thanks again, and I hope to see the SHFM family again soon.